Good evening. It's Joyful Hermit, and probably notice I've got eyebrows. I went somewhere last night. I am going to try to build up my body, get some energy, and get some muscle strength renewed by trying this sport called pickleball. And I don't know if it's going to work. My pain doctor, I talked it over with him. I need something that will be fun to motivate me. I have always used manual labor as what gets me physically up and going and my body, keep my body built up. But something happened to me during this last surgery. And afterwards, I could tell there was a shift in me, and the pain of the knee and the pain of the spine and my neck really depleted me in a way, maybe even psychologically. And then I think I've mentioned how I am fairly sure that God didn't like the direction I was going in my life and wasn't focused in on what He wants me to be doing, which now is, I'm fairly sure, and a couple other viewers kindly gave input also, that to do my sharing of my spiritual life and things I have learned about the spiritual life and God and the mystical and the temporal realms and etc. Share that with people for whatever worth or whatever anyone might take from it, and then and not get pulled back out too much in the temporal or consumed with something, or even just squandering and philandering my time away. I don't mean philander as far as anything untoward, but squandering, wasting time, and distracting by things that aren't worthwhile for my mind, heart, or soul. So I have been doing this, and my knee is so much. It's like I say, the pain doctor declared it a miracle, and feels it needs to be written up, that other surgeons and doctors need to know about this. Um, so turning that up. So I knew, though, I need to do something because I am not motivated. I am exhausted when I wake up, and I still have quite a bit of pain, although my knee pain is way down, way down. It's just my spine that's still bad and will always need to be on pain meds. But so I thought I would talk about something that a viewer named John wrote in about. He had always assumed that narcissists were female. And then after my video, my narcissist happened to be a male. And narcissistic sociopaths, that combination does tend to run in male population. Don't know why. I don't know why. But John, this man named John, wrote in a comment that the devil does not discriminate, and that is so true. And also, conversely, God doesn't. God isn't choosing for any reason of particularity one over another for anything. He loves us all. God's love, as we have discussed in Learning to Love as God, is equitable. It's just and fair. God loves fairly. But the devil does not discriminate. I liked that thought of that if we're going to sin, anyone can, and anyone does. And if we're going to have a personality disorder, it's possible for anyone to cave to the disorder in us, or the weakness, or the tendencies toward it, and then go full blown into it by agreeing, by choosing, by not stopping ourselves, by not getting therapy for some of these disorders. So I thought I would talk a little bit about personality disorders. And I had even mentioned I don't usually look back at these videos. And I did, though, a few days ago. And I don't know, I just sickened myself. just talking about the experiences, or I this or I that, or I think, or anyhow, and on. Ramble, it seemed to me. But then it turned out some people commented that was one of their best videos that helped them the most. So I did think, though, in that uh, instant or whatever, that I was sort of disgusted, and I thought, oh my gosh, I sound like a narcissist. Just all this stuff, my experiences, and on and on. So even though maybe they're helpful and it has been cathartic for me, I really feel like I've made progress. I haven't had flashbacks since I emptied out major the major flow of my marriage to a narcissistic sociopath, who at the time I didn't realize was. So I got to thinking, though, about what I had learned when I'd gotten over this half a doctorate in clinical psychology, and learned from the DSM, at that point in time, I think it was DSM 4R back in the late 80s, maybe it was 3R. It's a diagnostic, a measuring tool, um, with all different disorders and all kinds of mental illnesses and psychoses and all these listed. And then there are usually anywhere from 6 to 10 or 12 markers or characteristics of, we'll just take personality disorders as a group for an example. And then we could take narcissism as an example, as a group. There are so many listed characteristics in it. In these disorders, it'll say, um, of course, that anything that is 7 out of 10 or 9 out of 12 or something like that, that indicates a severe or a marked case, or a diagnostic. You can go ahead and diagnose if a person has a majority or over majority, 3/4 or more of these symptoms, these characteristics or attributes of, say, narcissism. And otherwise, then it's, that they're in a cautionary zone and could use help, could use some therapy, or use awareness. When I had my DSM 3R, I used to sort of go over and review it. And every now and then I still will look up disorders online and just review for my own good what they include, and try to view myself as objectively as we can, pray and ask God to help us and our guardian angels to help us to point out truth in ourselves. And then if something is getting a little too much, I try to tone it down. I try to keep things in check. If I'm becoming too selfish, or I don't even know all the different characteristics, but probably would do better with the, more recently I had looked up introversion and extroversion and covert and all of these different ones. Plus, I do keep abreast of narcissistic sociopath, of sociopathy, and then sometimes there's portions of psychopath that can be included with the sociopath, or bits of sociopath included with the psychopath. So I sort of keep check that way myself. Now I'll do it online, look up these things every now and then, and to be aware. Also with OCD as opposed to OCPD. And I think I used to have more tendencies toward maybe OCD, of wanting order and a little perfectionistic. Even when I would write, I always like to have my words correct and my punctuation correct, and that's good, that's fine, that's good. It's when we go too far with it, and when we become agitated or upset when something is out of order, or we become obsessive hand washing, or obsessive, everything has to be in a certain order in the drawer or in the closet, and we become distressed by it. Or we're starting to put notes all over that we need, for other people even. Has to be done this way, has to be done that way. Make sure you load the dishwasher a certain way, or the person in the head of the household gets upset and becomes ill from it, even ill, and life becomes even more closed in when we get too heavy into a disorder, a personality disorder, because we find the person starts spending their energy, their time, their mind, their emotions on keeping all their issues together and keeping it as they need things to be, obsessively, or with a sociopath, all their lies in order, keep their little game in order, their trick that they're running in their life to fool other people and get away with it, or planning out. They're very controlling and also charming, though, and so they try to keep all this disorder and disease going, these sicknesses, so that's how they thrive, that's how they function. So I wanted to also bring up that all of us can have bits and pieces of various disorders. Any of us, like I mentioned, I can have some of the um, obsessive compulsive. Of some days, I'm telling you, the mess of my partially renovated house gets to me. It used to get to me, and you'll see in some earlier videos, I had what was this nice little end of life house that I lived in an area where I could afford it. My house payment was low, and I planned to live there until I died. But God had other ideas, and I had a um, paranoid schizophrenic neighbor woman who became obsessed with me, and talk about evil and demonically oppressed, if not a little bit getting close to possession. But it became very dangerous for me there. And her husband was a malicious type person, a scary man, and an adult son was nasty. And I wasn't safe there. Eventually, I had to leave. I had to get a protective order. And then the police, after that was running out, and they found out that these people were going to do a lawsuit against me for having gotten a protective order. People can sue for anything, and you're out there scrambling to pay for a lawyer and get one. And then good luck trying to get people who know you, who had witnessed terrible things, to be willing to come to court and testify on your behalf, because they don't want this horrible, evil, crazy woman and her husband and adult son going after them. So even the man who worked on my yard, who caught her one time she had me cornered with her lawnmower running 6 inches from my feet, and I was backed up against a stone embankment. And fortunately, he had come, he was out in front, and he had seen her whip out of her garage with the lawnmower and beeline, and knew I had gone down to clip some hedges that were near the property line, which was always dangerous to be out there, vulnerable to this woman. And she was about my age, but she had become obsessed with me and was obviously clinically mentally ill and not on meds. So he came running and started shouting, and thank heavens, because I just stood there. I finally put my head down. I prayed. The only prayer that came to my mind was, "Dear Lord, you know I don't have insurance. I can't afford prosthetic feet." Of all things I would think of, it was practical. But it was true. I didn't have health insurance until I could finally purchase Medicare myself. because I didn't have Social Security quarters, being disabled all that time. So not enough. So I'm just by God's grace, I was able to get Medicare when I was 65, and immediately bad things started happening. Had an infection in a thumb and uh, different ailments, and had to have a PET scan and scan of my abdomen and all this ER trip. So God provides, but I'm telling you, there are some very scary cases out there of people who have gone too far with their disorders, maybe going into mental illness. But that she probably had been mentally ill for a long time, and it just got worse. And obviously, they had no friends or anything. But see, they would accuse me of those things to the police because I was a hermit, but I didn't advertise it. So, I had friends who would come, but not often. And priest would come now and then and bless the house and things. But so anyway, these disorders can be um, tricky, and you don't want to get them out of bounds. But I had this nice house back there, and everything was in order. I had painted the interior myself to save some money, and I didn't save much, but it bonded me with that house. And I was really sort of bored, and I was in my getup, my costume, so I would look presentable, and that's what I had to do last night. I didn't want to embarrass a person I know who was probably a little bit felt like I was infiltrating her space anyway by going to this place to see about getting a beginner lesson, a group beginner lesson for very inexpensive. So just to see if I could use pickleball to strengthen myself. So anyway, there's that house all perfect and everything and in order. And I literally started to think, I'm getting too used to all this order and everything perfect. And living alone, am I becoming one of these fussy old ladies and every hair in order, and got my hair fixed in because I was trying to blend in with the people at the cathedral. It didn't work, really. It didn't work, but I had tried. And so in those videos, I don't even look like myself, I don't think. But so back then, I thought, well, let some things go. Then I get to the island house, which I got rather misled. It was a tear down, and I didn't know it. It cosmetically fixed over, and it was infested. Mentioned that with rats, raccoons, birds. Awful. And I had to gut that place. It took me 5.5 years. I had to learn how to do all this construction stuff, which I loved doing then because people were ripping me off. I couldn't afford it. My inheritance was stuck in that house. And so I took me 5.5 years to work my way out of it and get my mom and dad's hard-earned money back because I just felt terrible what I had done, the mistake I had made with the years they had saved and wanted their daughters to have something. And my mother, especially since I had had such a sad story and didn't have anything. I had used whatever money I had to help my kids get through college. So still had to pay off a loan for the son's university. Took 10 years to pay that off after my mother had died. So anyway, things can get rough, but that place was such a mess. I lost any kind of OCD that was ever starting in on me, that was getting to even mid-range, living there. And so here, I can handle it okay, but sometimes even it gets to me. And when when I haven't felt well enough for the last year, when my thyroid went and I didn't have any energy, I couldn't do anything about it. And it would really start to bug me at times, and I would just pray, Lord, get me in balance. So I think I want you to understand that, and most of you do, but we all have personalities. And they all have bits and pieces of some of these personalities that are listed and can be diagnosed. It's when they become disordered that's the problem. And when they become disordered or start to become, I maintain it's because we have lost our relationship with God, where we are back and forth with God and asking Him to help us. And we've also lost touch with the value and the purpose of an angel being given to us. And I have a video out there. In the past, I think maybe I had a purple turtleneck on or something, and was in here, but before I tore it up, or tore up this house. But talking about how God showed me, yes, I do have a guardian angel. I was sort of, I was doubting it and a little bit, maybe sarcastic even, or just, I was judgmental of some of these older women when I became Catholic who would talk about their angels and call them by name. And I thought, well, I asked one, well, did you name your own angel? Or I thought, oh, I didn't have that in Protestantism. We knew of angels in the Bible, but didn't. Angels became more popular in my lifetime, and later when I was maybe in my 30s or 40s, they became sort of a popular, trendy thing, but not as a spiritual reality. But wow, did I learn. Yes, indeed, I do have an angel. The angel has a name. I didn't name it. I would never have. And God knew that. And God had to humble me down and show me my errors of my thinking. And in a most miraculous, supernatural way that involved the temporal again. It was a beautiful blend of temporal and mystical all together. So, we ask God to help us, ask our angels to help us to keep in balance. And if somebody offhandedly even says, wow, you're OCD, or more likely it would be OCPD, especially with a woman, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. OCD is slightly different in the markers of it. And personality disorder ones are more controlling with it and more perfectionistic in that they think they are right and other people are wrong. And they get to the point where they want to try to make other people do as they do. And a lot of lists and notes on walls and instructions, and become angry or very upset even with a marriage partner who isn't as they are and who they think doesn't care that things are out of order and things. So it's a little bit more involved in a little different way. Check on these things, and because we all have bits and pieces, and it's best to stay in balance before things get too far, because then the devil moves in on any kind of disorder or weakness in us. If we start sinning and we don't get on top of it, and we don't ask God forgiveness, and we don't forgive ourselves, and mull over things, or become obsessed with what we've done even, or can't move on. Like, I wasn't obsessed, but I kept having those flashbacks. I needed to do more to try to get healed and to get more out. And part of it, I think, was doing my sharing that God had wanted me to do, even though it bared me anonymously even, but it did. And my own flaws, and I saw them and I knew them, but I also saw others in a different light, in a more compassionate and an understanding light. So that was healing. That got part of me back in order. But the devil will move in on our weaknesses. even when we have the flu or my knee replacement, that the pain was so over the top. As it turned out, it was, because it was a failure. I didn't realize, but I wasn't handling it. And I would get very down and very begging God to take me, and just wishing I could die, and even thinking, I would have ideologies of, how I could do it, how I could end my life if it got too hard to take. And I don't do that, but when you get to the point when you're thinking of how you could, that's too far, or it's getting to the point where the devil could really move in on that and deceive you in some way. And the devil is allowed to interfere with the temporal, like with Jesus when he was being tempted by the devil, and earthquakes and things. The devil can interfere. God allows the devil to interfere with the world and the world order, with geography, with weather, with our living conditions, our situations. Read through the book of Job in the Old Testament. That's a total example of how God allows the devil to go only so far, but the devil cannot enter, is bound from our soul. The devil, unless we allow, the devil is not allowed by God to mess with our intellect or our will. If we give our will away to the devil, we've done it to ourselves. If we give our intellect if we cave in our intellect and go too far with our sins or our disordered thinking or our self-pity or anything that's a weakness or a disorder or a sin, the devil, we're opening our lives up to the devil. So just so we get that, that's a reality. And that's how we learn to not give over to the devil, and to encourage others daily while it is still today. People who are sick, encourage them, help them, so that they don't go to despair. An illness is better handled with another person. God sent my neighbor who barely knew me, noticing no one was here, to come over, and she stepped right in. And I did pay her because that was the just thing to do. She deserved it. She was working for me for an extended period of time. At first she refused, but I said, well, if I were doing this for you, I would be too proud. She admitted, I would be too proud to have somebody do that for free for me. And I said, think about it. She came back and said, I'll accept. And I paid her, I think, fairly, very fairly. And she would come 5 times a day, and then down to 4, and then 3, and a couple. And then I said, I've got to do this on my own. So, but she helped me so much. Would come over and even sit for a few minutes and talk. And I was going through other heartaches at the time of actually accepting and having to face that adult children had wanted to be freed, to live their own lives more free of me, of a parent, for quite some time. And I came to understand that was the natural need they had, and to accept it, and to not. And then like I said the other day, then God helped me with something else on realizing why I had such a linkage with these children, because God sent me back from death to rear them. And so I had to understand they are reared, and they don't need. If they do need, they can contact me. But God wanted me to live my life now and to do his mission, the mission he also sent me back to do. So if we keep up with these things, and if we recognize ways we can help people who will automatically, anyone with a disorder, anyone being persecuted, anyone with sickness or surgery, or who's had a bad diagnosis, or even people with personality disorders, to a degree with that. The main thing with that is to come up with a way to let them know if it is safe for you to do so. A psychopath, a sociopath, narcissists will get angry, but sociopaths and psychopaths, and there's a few others if you start examining. Look up personality disorders in Google and familiarize yourself. Some of these you don't want to confront. If you can gently, I know somebody who, a husband had told his wife, I think you're sick. I think you have OCD. Well, he had it a little wrong. More OCPD. But that upset the wife because the OCPD person thinks that they have it all together and are perfect. And it's others that aren't perfect and need help. So that was very offensive. And then if the person asks other people, it can mean you're going to be cut off. So it's hard to do that to, like, a friend, to say, yes, you are. I do see this in you, and you should probably go to a therapist. Oh, people can react terribly if you suggest a therapist. There's still that stigma with it, and it shouldn't be. We have to lose our pride. And I have a cousin who said she treats herself regularly, like every year she treats herself to some therapy. She says, it's my sanity. It's refreshing, and it helps me make sure I'm staying in balance. So do that for yourselves. If you feel like there's something, as you do a self-examination of conscience, that's a spiritual self-examination. Do a self-examination of personality disorders. Just as we do an examination of, if we don't feel well, we take a temperature, we check this or that, look at our throats and things. So this is for our mental and psychological health. And it also familiarizes us with what disorders are out there and how they operate and how the devil can move in on weaknesses, so that we won't get ourselves into or stay in relationships that are very, very disease-ridden with a person. And believe me, when you live with a person like that for a while, you'll become ill in codependency or in having to try to constantly maneuver around that. You'll become weak. Somebody who's controlling or a sociopath will take you right down to you feel like you're nothing, but you don't realize that. You lose your confidence. You lose your inner compass. And even you might start going along with something that they do that's wrong and be convinced, well, it's not that bad. Something that's just dumb, but not at all nice, not holy, not a nice thing to do. Or they put down other people. A narcissist will, because they build themselves up. And after a while, you can start becoming critical and putting down people. And it becomes a habit. You don't recognize it because disorders you can pick up environmentally from those you are around. Some of them are hereditary also. So see, it's a good thing to learn and to understand and to know what the viewer John said. The devil does not discriminate. He'll move in on anyone who shows a chink hole of weakness. And that includes the person who's with a disordered person who is starting to become confused. Or um, uh, my ex got to the point where he would threaten if I didn't do this or that with him, or yeah, that he would, that would be it, or and you're going to regret it, and all this kind of stuff. And by then, I was consciously afraid of the person. So and he would say, "Oh, this isn't a bad thing. This is not bad." And one thing I tried, wasn't the end of the world, but I just said, this is dumb. I'm not doing this thing. It was, I think it was pot. Somebody from his district office had given him pot. And it was in a state that's very liberal, but it wasn't legal at the time. And he brought it home, and he says, "Well, we're going to smoke this. We're going to try this." And because he was all about how I was making the marriage bed. He had me convinced. They do that. It gets to that point where you lose yourself, and you believe, and you think you're the problem because they convince you. They do that. They're good. They're good. The devil's good, and the devil's in them by then, and has been for a long time. So, and if we do this, and you need to loosen up, you're just so uptight. You're just, and he would put me down religiously, and I wasn't anything to the degree now. I mean, I went to church and all, but my soul had not been opened up by God, because I wasn't free for it. I was in this sick relationship, this evil, sick pit. So, but it did nothing, because I never smoked. And I said, this is terrible. And I said, I can't believe a district office person would be doing this and giving it. He didn't even buy it, gave it to him. Well, who knows? Maybe he lied. Probably. I just thought of that. And then other things. He got into watching horrible videos, and that he tried to get me. And he would threaten me, but I started crying and left. I said, I can't. This is terrible. It's terrible. Just sick. It's made me sick. And I refused, but it was over then anyway. But and I did learn when I walked out crying and said, no, he didn't do anything to me. Yes, he left, he divorced, but he was going to anyway, and that's what needed to happen. And by then, I was ready for it. I just knew from this therapist that it was going to be tricky, and I knew just to play the mouse and let him toy or do whatever, but I did set my limits as far as I was no more going along with the things that he tried to coerce me into doing. He was trying to demean me and get me in league with him for the devil to move in on me, I realized later. So don't get out of it, for one thing. And another person left a message, had been in a relationship for 2.5 years, but thankfully got out of it. Praise God. And the person hadn't targeted. And because there were no links, though. Once you start having links with the sick person, and it could be it can be an OCPD person, and you're married to the person, and you have a home together, and maybe a family member, maybe there were other people involved in this beautiful home, and all of your hard work, if you're the main breadwinner, is in that. And if you divorce or leave, you're leaving what was yours, and you have to give up half or sell it, and then and you think, well, no, I've been married this long, I'd better stick it out. No, because you're going to be damaged. and you already are damaged and don't realize it. The material things are not worth it. The temporal things are not worth it, in my estimation, and I would think in doctors, clinical psychologist estimations. And I also, this is my other recommendation, just from having been in a professional school, getting my doctorate in clinical psychology, of other people who were taking courses. It runs the gamut, especially where I was in the state I was in. And there were people there who were also getting masters to be a counselor, marriage family counselor. And no, go to a clinical psychologist, one who has a doctorate in psychology and who has the licensing that is more strict and the more years of schooling and the more rigorous testing and review. So get the best when you go. And if you have insurance, they'll pay. But, and I'm not putting down marriage family counselors or that, if it's more minor or something. But if you have a big problem on your hands, get to and do your research, because also those who were in the program with me getting their doctorates, some of them were just barely out of their own therapy or still in it with some very serious issues. People who had mental illness, and they don't advertise when they start taking their courses. So some people in there who, and also some were, if you're a Christian, who you wouldn't want to be going to. So do your research on who you go to see. And if you aren't a religious person and don't mind, or you want to go to somebody who's New Age or something, which I'm not knocking these people, but if you're religious, it's not going to be a meeting of the minds or approaching the situation from your viewpoint with God. That's all I'm saying, in the same way. So, but research them, maybe they would be excellent. So, but I was stunned by the people in the program and of some of them, and I thought, wow, I didn't realize that. And I wondered about the therapist that my ex-husband and I had. You know what? I thought, maybe if we'd had somebody different, but I think she did as well as she could, because the one time she did say, yes, you are a bully, and he went into a rage. So they do get control of others through how fearful they can become to us, and how dangerous they can become and threatening. So, but the devil will move in on disorders or any kind of illnesses, or even if you get too tired, or overworked, or stressed out. So that's why our emotional, mental, and physical health is all important as a means of keeping the devil at bay. It was mentioned when Jesus was tempted, he'd went out into the desert, and he had 40 days of fasting beforehand. He was weak, he was tired. That is to demonstrate to us how when we are in our weakened conditions, physically, mentally, emotionally, isolated or whatever, that's why being a hermit is not recommended until you are more advanced in years. Not to be young, just, fresh into a religious order, and all of a sudden you want to be a hermit, or you're very, very young. And I think the stealth hermit who watches videos, who was young when he left home and was homeless, but he didn't per se enter into more of a holy hermit type situation with God until he was older. because it's a hard life. And I don't know about his earlier life other than one video he has that he would have jobs off and on. So he was more around people and more doing things. So he wasn't strictly more hermit-like. Um, anyway, I am going to try. That's some about disorders and things you can do to stay on top of them and to learn about them so you recognize them in relationships you have with others. And if it's a relationship that is causing disease to dis-ease, uneasiness with you, or dis-ease, if it's going to start altering you, then research, learn about ways, and ask God and your angel, help me get out of this. I had been praying in my marriage at the very end, toward the end, after he had said he wanted out to help me. And I had said that critical prayer, do with me what you will, 2 weeks before the accident, because I could tell things weren't right in the relationship at all. I had known that, but it was coming, I was allowing it to come to the surface because he had been gone for about 10 months prior with his job and rarely coming home. Came home weekends at first, but then not. And so I'd had time away. Frankly, it was a relief, but I was exhausted because I had all this on my own to deal with, an infant and work and my schooling and all the household. So this is all good to consider. And back to my realizing that with the fatigue I've had, although I don't have the nausea as badly with the pump increased, but I still need it more increased because I'm still having too much lumbar pain and digestive issues from radiating pain. And but I'm exhausted. Today last night I went to check out about this inexpensive beginners group lesson and just experienced some things there and met the person in charge and that, and thought maybe I should see if I got a membership that was a better price to do that than to pay as you go. But the time was running out, but I'm allowed to give it a try. I mean, they were very kind about my situation, because if my neck gets so bad, I could easily lose balance when my neck gets really bad, and I get what I call spatial disorientation, where things just feel off kilter from how severe my neck is. So I may not be able to use this fun sport. And I've seen people in their 70s play, and they weren't running. They were, picking up the ball and would hit it into the net every other time. And I thought, this is my group, That would be me, or I'd be worse, but they'd be kind. So I realized it's not what I had seen when I pray for somebody who I know very well. I pray for them, and through when they play at times. So I watch if it's a national thing, and so I have seen. Oh my goodness, it can be a very active and rigorous sport. But I thought I need something fun that's going to force me out and learning, and maybe some laughs. Maybe some of these other older people would be laughing, or somebody would say, now stand here and hit the ball against the wall and get used to that. It's movement, and it would get me out and up and going, and hopefully start to build up some stamina. Then I transition back to my manual labor as my exercise. But right now I'm so depleted, I shouldn't get up on a ladder. I'm too weak. My muscles aren't developed. And my mind somehow isn't motivated for anything. I've lost my impetus. And this is the only thing that came to mind because when I have seen it, it's fun. People are having fun. And I've read about it, how and people are laughing. And so I've already talked over with God. My purpose is to build up my body and get some agility going again and some strength and stamina. Because I got back last night just from being gone about an hour and walking around a little and checking it out. And I was just wiped out just from that much of exertion. So I've got a long ways to go, and I'm going to have to be patient. I think I'm going to consider that for the knee surgery alone, it's coming on to 5 months. That I'll have to allow 5 months for my buildup. But I wasn't even that built up, totally built up when I went in for the knee surgery, but pretty well I had built up in a couple of months of some very aggressive gardening after my thyroid had been out and I didn't realize it, and I was pretty much bedridden last year with fatigue from the thyroid. So, and my thyroid's working right, everything's okay. I just need to get through this mental, maybe the devil is blocking me. But I also know that God is not going to let me leach out into the world. And my pain is, if somebody wants, oh, well, let's go to lunch. No, I can't sit. I can't take the pain of sitting. But I'm not there for social life. And I've told God that. I know that. And it's to get built up through something that is motivating me, and somehow the fun of that, and to get into an activity where I stop thinking about my pain and my body is ideal. And get built up enough so I can come back and, I'll be back all the time, obviously, but after doing my drilling or my lesson, come back and eventually be strong enough to start doing more exercises here, feel secure enough to go for a walk with Lovey, who's big, got big. It wasn't supposed to be big, but if he's so friendly, if he sees another dog, and he could just pull the old lady right down. So I can't risk that. I don't think he could now, but he actually did right after the surgery. Bolted, and I wasn't prepared, and I fell into the street. Wasn't injured at all, but still, it could have been. So I don't want to risk things like that. So it could be that I won't be able to do this. We'll find out in the lesson. But the man there last night assured me that with older people and beginners, they make sure that we know what little things to do and what we're not going to be doing. And I said, good, because I'm not in this for, to be playing in tournaments or anything like that. I'm just here to get built up in a fun way and maybe some laughs. I really could use some laughs. And that's another thing when you're dealing with situations that you've been in. I call it laugh therapy. And I make myself laugh to the count of 10. I'll use my fingers to count, and I'll just do these false laughs up to 10. And by the time I get to about 7, I know I'm so ridiculous that I start laughing genuinely. Give that a try if you need some laugh therapy in your life. Anyway, this is all part of being able to be healthy enough to love as God loves. If we are messed up ourselves, it's going to be harder for God to communicate with us clearly, and we learn about the devil so that we can discern. But the devil doesn't discriminate. He'll go after anyone, and we're up for grabs as much as the next person. So humble down. Because it can happen. It happened to me, and actually, I didn't know that God wanted me for himself at the time, And I thought, well, maybe I would remarry. And I had 2 other encounters with men, and they were horrible. It was, God didn't want me to meet someone that was going to be good, but at least I realized that here I was, and a similar sick kind of person, different but similar. And so I had to study more and learn more about that, and what it was about me that attracted them to me, and my own weakness, until I got my own strength to say, no, no, I'm not going to. Um, Even though a person might be fascinating, intelligent, conversational, if they've got a personality disorder and wrong, they're wrong, and get out. And you have to just be that strict with it. And you can think, well, maybe I'm supposed to be helping this person. No, not unless they're paying you for therapy and you're a clinical psychologist. You can pray for people. We can pray for people. What's wrong with prayer? That we don't think it's enough. So I had to ask myself that too. And bamboozle out of relationships with people who are limiting us from health, or if we're healthy, they are limiting us from freedom of going farther in our spiritual lives, further in our spiritual lives. God bless His real presence in us. Let us keep learning all the different facets of what it is and what's needed to learn to love as God loves. And I'm excited about it still. Big challenge, and it's a major answer to a life that will lead right into the other side. Good night.